Good afternoon and welcome to the June question and A session. My name is Jason Killeen, and I'm an Assistant Executive Director with the Department of Cannabis Regulation. Welcome everybody. We are happy to announce that we launched the annual license application process on Monday, May 1st. Businesses that had temporary approval and a legal business entity record were migrated over to the annual license application process. And we're working with our vendor Excella to migrate over the remainder of the pipeline. Some businesses have not created legal business entity records, so we're in the process of getting those records stood up. And then we're also in the process of migrating the temporary approval application records into annual license application records. So we anticipate that transition will continue over the next several weeks, but we hope to have the majority of the work done by Friday, June 16th, so that we can keep moving forward. And with that, let's hop into the questions.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Jason. Our first question comes from Ernie O. How long will it take DCR to approve a license for entities that are approved by the state? The state deadline is June 30th. So if we submit to DCR on July 1st, how long are you estimating approval to be?
So the state deadline to issue provisional licenses to social equity applicants is June 30th. If you're already in the state pipeline, you should be in the local pipeline and have either a temporary approval application or an annual license application pending before the department. Generally, it takes anywhere from 30 to 90 days to deem the application filed. And then from there, it could take several months to basically complete the equity share review, as well as schedule the initial inspection and ensure that the applicant passes the initial inspection for temporary approval. For the annual licensing process, we'll have to do the land use review and then make a recommendation to issue an annual license. And depending on the license type, it may or may not require us to do a community meeting as well as do a public hearing before the Cannabis Regulation Commission. But if you are in the state pipeline, you should also already be in the city's pipeline and working with your analyst towards licensure.
Our next question comes from Aaron J. What is DCR going to do about the timeline where existing medical marijuana dispensaries are supposed to stop cultivating at their original locations in 2024? And if extended, what if these retailers want to move in their CPA, but there are no industrial locations in their CPA to move their grows?
So right now, the municipal code only allows existing medical marijuana dispensaries, the phase one applicants, limited grandfathering through the end of calendar year 2024. So there's no motion or recommendation to extend that deadline at this time. So EMMDs have had the opportunity to bifurcate their licenses from the original location to compliant locations. So if you know that you have a license that's not in a compliant location, you have the ability to submit a relocation request. And based on the law that was just enacted earlier this month, licensees are able to relocate within their existing community plan area, or they're able to relocate to a community plan area that has not reached undue concentration. And I anticipate before the end of the calendar month, we'll be publishing which community plan areas are subject to a finding of undue concentration for the cultivation activity type.
Our next question came from a few individuals, Elvia H., Julian D., Rabin W., and J. Guevara. When will the next lottery take place? And if so, what will be the criteria and how will that round play out?
I don't know. At this time, there's not a concrete date to conduct the next lottery. If DCR were to immediately conduct a lottery, it would be based on the criteria that's established within the Los Angeles Municipal Code, for which we verified folks back in 2022 against. And based on how the code is written, only those folks that were verified in calendar year 2022 would be eligible to participate in the lottery based on that criteria. If we were to conduct the lottery again, it would probably be similar to the lottery we conducted in December of 2022, where we would look to do a random blind selection and have folks register for the lottery and then work with a contractor to allow them to do the blind selection and then give those SEIAs the opportunity to apply for that activity type. But you know, there's a new mayoral administration. There's been some changes at the council level, and there may be future policy decisions that will affect DCR's ability to conduct the lottery, as well as identify what criteria would be used for that future lottery. So stay tuned.
We'll do that. The next question comes from Jonathan C. Will the abandonment deadline be extended?
So as part of the recent amendments, the ability to refile an abandoned application was extended from 1 year to 3 years. So any of the records that were deemed abandoned in 2022 get the benefit of the 3-year refiling timeline.
Levon E asks, what should a top 200 applicant from round 1 do after knowing that the ordinance passed to reapply for a new retail location?
I'm not 100% clear on the question. So folks that were part of the 200 for phase 3 retail round 1, of course, either had a location that was tied to their 2019 application, or they had the ability to identify a new compliant location. So whether the record is deemed abandoned and they have the ability to refile, and either refile in the original community plan area or in a community plan area that has not reached undue concentration, that's one option. And then the updated code also gives DCR the ability to accept pre-application review records from approximately 12 applicants whose records were deemed ineligible for processing due to its proximity to a sensitive use. And DCR is sending out an email communication to those social equity individual applicants to let them know that they're going to have the opportunity to file a pre-application review record for consideration. And because from the nomenclature standpoint, those records were deemed abandoned, they'll have up to 3 years to file that pre-application record.
Our next question from Paula B. How long does DCR anticipate the CEQA process to take?
The drafting of the environmental report will probably take 30 to 90 days, depending on the complexity of the project. The amended code does give applicants the ability to hire an environmental consultant to draft that environmental document that can be submitted with the application, which may reduce the processing timeline. If the question is related to when are the environmental documents deemed final, that's tied to the actual issuance of the annual license and the adoption by the first level decision maker to accept those environmental findings along with the decision to issue the annual license, which could, depending on the application type, take at least 3 to 6 months.
We have a question from 2 different individuals, similar in nature. It's Rabin W. and Daryl S. How can I get rental assistance from SEED? I've been waiting for a couple of months.
So the deadline to submit a completed application was March 31st. If you submitted your application for the C 2.0 rental assistance, but you have not received any disbursements, please reach out to the social equity team. You can email them at dcr.sep@lacity.org, and they can either review your file or they can connect you with Elevate Impact LA, which is their grant administrator for the C 2.0 program.
And then our next question comes from Raj A. Why do social equity applicants previously verified in 2018 need to reapply to maintain their SEIA status?
The simple answer is the criteria changed from the original criteria that was in place in 2018 and 2019. So the original criteria and verification is still valid for the application records, whether they're phase 2 or phase 3 round 1 that were submitted in conjunction with that criteria being in place. However, the council adopted amended criteria and updated the municipal code to require that DCR utilize that updated criteria for new application phases like phase 3 retail round 2. So if you were verified and you have an existing record, your verification status can stay with that original record. But if you're seeking to apply for new activities or participate in future programming, you'll have to be verified under the current criteria in order to participate.
Yadida L asks this question: if I am in the contract process with an investor, but don't yet have a location, how much time do I have left? Can I get an extension?
So the first part of the application process is to identify a proposed business premises location and submit a pre-application record for review for distancing and land use compliance. So if you haven't already gone through the pre-application review process, there's nothing pending before the department. If you participated in the lottery and you were one of the 100 social equity individual applicants that were selected and given the opportunity to submit pre-application records for the retail storefront activity, the ordinance only gives you up to 1 year to file your pre-application record for consideration. And because the code sets the time frame to submit as 1 year, DCR does not have the discretion to grant an extension of time.
Our next question comes from Kia Chi. When will information be given regarding the PCN application process, and will the process change drastically?
DCR hopes to open up that process in August. The big difference between when the PCN process reopens and the original pilot program is DCR now has the ability to conduct a pre-application review to identify whether or not the property is zoned properly and properly distanced from sensitive uses prior to the applicant deciding to submit their PCN request to the city council. If it is deemed to comply with the zoning and the distancing restriction from sensitive uses, then of course the applicant would have up to a year to submit an application if a PCN finding is made. So those are the big changes. Otherwise, the timing and everything else remains the same. Is once we've identified the pre-application review record is in an community plan area subject to a finding of undue concentration, the applicant would have up to 30 days to file their PCN request and pay the PCN fee. If they file the request and pay the fee, then DCR has 30 days to review the request and then transmit it to the city clerk. And then once the city clerk has received it and they've posted it to the council file index and it's been assigned a council file number, the city council has up to 90 days to make the necessary public convenience or necessity finding. If council doesn't act on the PCN request within 90 days, it's deemed denied by operation of law.
Thank you, Jason. Our next question from Mark R. I'm a social equity applicant. If I miss a deadline for the state provisional license, can I still participate in future lotteries or apply for future activities?
So the deadline to get a new state provisional license is June 30th. After that date, the state will only issue annual licenses. So you still have the opportunity to submit applications, except the only difference is you're not going to be applying for temporary approval at the local level. You'll be applying for an annual license so that you can meet the requirements for the state annual licensing process.
And then our next question from Jay Guevara. He says, it's been a challenge to find a compliant location. Will DCR extend the SEIA round 2 timeline to find a location? What happens this December if we are still looking?
So as I mentioned in a previous question, unfortunately, DCR does not have the discretion to extend the period of time that an SEIA selected as part of the round 2 lottery has to file their pre-application record. The code does state that folks only have up to 1 year to submit the pre-application record for DCR consideration. So unless the mayor and city council amend the municipal code, if you have not submitted your pre-application review record by the December date, you will not have another opportunity to submit a pre-application record, and your opportunity would just go back into the pool of available application spots that DCR can consider, and it would be provided to another social equity applicant as part of a future lottery.
Our next question from Hofhannes V. Is Form AN 5000 for CEQA the last document needed to obtain a state license? If so, how long would it take?
So the Form 5000 is a collection of the documents and forms DCR requires for the annual application process. So the existing LIC 4013 form that's used for the project-specific description and information for our environmental review is a subset of the annual 5000 form. So the annual 5000 form is going to have updated forms that are more tied to the new municipal code that have the correct references to the amended code and take into account some of the changes that the mayor and council recently adopted. But the ANN 5000 form is really going to be for the benefit of folks that did not go through the temporary approval application process, and they're transitioning from the pre-application record into an annual license application record so that they can complete one set of documents, and based on how they populate the first several documents, it'll populate those fields in the other forms to make the documents themselves more consistent and make it easier for the applicant to complete all of the necessary forms to get them submitted.
Our next question from Lindsay. I have secured a building. Now what? How long before the city approves the location before I can begin my build out?
So it sounds like there's a couple different things going on with that question. The first step, of course, is to go through the pre-application record so that DCR can review the location to determine whether or not it complies with the distancing and zoning requirements in the code. If you've already submitted your pre-application record and it was deemed eligible for further processing, then you have up to 1 year to submit your application. So until the application is submitted, applicable fees are paid, and all of the forms are submitted, your application is not deemed filed and an analyst may not be working on it. Separately, the Department of Building and Safety and the fire department and public health all have their own permitting processes for a location. So if you're looking to do tenant improvements, you're looking to pull permits, you're going to need to work with those agencies because DCR doesn't have any control over those processes.
The next question also comes from Lynn C. Are there any grants to help me open my cannabis business?
At this time, DCR doesn't have any grant opportunities to help facilitate new entrepreneurs coming into the regulated market. If more funding becomes available in the future, that would allow for direct financial assistance to applicants and licensees. The social equity team will make an announcement and let folks know how they can apply for those grant funds. But at this time, we don't have any open grant funds that allow for direct financial assistance.
Our next question from MS. If a P3 retail round 2 lottery selectee submits a pre-app within the 1 year allotted time, but the pre-app is denied due to non-compliant location and the applicant does not resubmit another pre-app before the 1 year mark, will that lottery record be closed out and the applicant will not be able to move forward at all? And the last portion is DCR's decision to close out the lottery record appealable.
So I don't know if the first part was a question or it was a statement, but if it was a statement, it's a correct statement. Social equity individual applicants selected through the Phase 3 Retail Round 2 lottery have up to a year to submit a pre-application record. After 1 year, the lottery record is closed out. So the system will not allow you to initiate a new pre-application record from the lottery record. So if you submit a pre-application record that is deemed ineligible and you have not submitted a new pre-application record by the 1 year deadline, the lottery record will be closed out and you will not have an opportunity to submit a new pre-application record. And the lottery records are closed out by operation of law because the code only gives you 1 year to submit the pre-application record from it. So those decisions are not appealable.
Our next question from Rafi S. Please verify the email address for CPR requests so that I may determine undue concentration related to cultivation.
I will throw out the email address, but it may be helpful if a member of our team can drop it into the chat to make everybody's life a little bit easier. But it's DCR CPRA requests@lacity.org.
Thank you. Our next question from Paul R. What other opportunities are available for me as a Tier 1 social equity candidate since I was not selected in the lottery?
At this time, social equity applicants have the ability to apply for non-storefront delivery, distribution transport only, testing labs, non-volatile manufacturing, the cultivation processor, and the nursery license types. So if you're interested in any of those commercial cannabis activities, you have the ability to go through the pre-application process. And then if your proposed business premises is eligible for further processing, you'll have the opportunity to submit an application.
Our next question from Levon E. Are you able to relocate if you are in the top 245 list, but you were denied due to sensitive use? Hopefully you can make something out of that.
Yeah, so Based on the code, applicants that have been deemed abandoned have the ability to reapply in their existing community plan area or in a community plan area that is not subject to a finding of undue concentration. So if a phase 3 retail round 1 applicant, because that list went up to record number 245, was deemed ineligible due to its proximity to a sensitive use, those records, now that DCR can accept a new record from those individuals, will be marked as abandoned refile, and they'll have up to 3 years to submit a new pre-application record to move forward with a application for the retail storefront activity. And again, based on the code, folks have the ability to reapply within their existing community plan area, or they can submit a pre-application record in a community plan area that has not reached undue concentration.
Thank you. Moving on, Cindy C asks, what is distancing from sensitive use, or what is the distancing from sensitive use?
For the retail activity with on-site sales, the proposed business premises location, the closest exterior wall to the commercial cannabis activity has to be 700 feet from a sensitive use. And then for retail with offsite sales and for non-retail activities, they have to be at least 600 feet from a school. More information can be found under LAMC section 105. And if you navigate to the DCR website, it can take you to the municipal code where you can see what the distancing restrictions are and what the specified sensitive uses are.
Thank you, Jason. Our question from Rafi S. If I'm a social equity applicant under the original requirement and I'm adding to existing cultivation activity, do I need to reapply under the new requirement to qualify? As a social equity owner, the original license was completed during phase 2.
I'm not 100% clear on the adding to existing cultivation activity component. If the individual is a phase 2 licensee and they're seeking to amend the cultivation license they currently hold, transition from specialty indoor to small indoor, medium indoor, or, go to a smaller cultivation size, that's possible. Depending on the change, it may be facilitated through either a business premises diagram for changes that are 2,500 square feet or less, or through the relocation process so that we can do another land use review to make sure that the entire parcel that you would be conducting the expanded activity at is properly zoned and it's properly distanced.
From Cindy C, is there a list on the website showing pending applications and already approved applications?
There's a list on the website that does show information. That information is not real time. We're working internally to put together a dynamic Google map that will be updated more frequently than once a month. So be on the lookout for that. And it'll be on the same page where the DCR licensing map is. What we intend to do there is have the licensing map only focus on sensitive uses, and then have a separate map that gets updated by DCR that deals with pre-application records, application records, and then licenses issued, so that the map is maintained in a more timely manner so that folks can utilize that information as they look for compliant properties.
Thanks, Jason. The next question comes from Mansouri Law. Please clarify whether the ANN 5000 form will encompass all the previous forms that were submitted. Will it be the only form required instead of multiple other forms?
So the ANN 5000 form will encompass all of the forms and documents under DCR's control for the annual license application process. So it will include attestations, indemnification agreement, and information specifically tied to getting to a complete annual application. The applicant will still have to upload proof of site control, their business premises diagram, and other things to their annual license record. But that ANN 5000 form will capture all of the DCR forms. And what it's going to do is it's going to be a linked PDF so that the fields that are, you know, duplicative across forms, once you populate it on the first section of the annual license application form, it'll populate those fields on the other forms. DCR will still keep the a la carte forms so that if we need updated forms, there's changes, something's not properly filled out, the analyst can then just request the a la carte form be completed and submitted to the department so that we can get you to a complete application.
Our next question comes from Rafi S. Do we need a health inspection for cultivation?
Yes. All commercial cannabis activities require a corresponding health permit. For the retail storefront activity or retail licenses with on-site sales, you have to have a health permit and be part of the emblem program in order to meet the requirements.
Mark R asks, is the cultivation processor only available to social equity applicants?
No, it's available to all applicants.
And then a follow-up question from Mark. Does the cultivation processor activity include harvesting and growing?
No, it does not. The cultivation processor allows for the holder of the license to go to a location where another licensee has the cultivation license to basically prune the other licensee's plants and dry that material, and then prepare it for manufacturing or testing, depending on what it happens to be. But the cultivation processor license type does not allow for the licensee to grow their own cannabis. It just allows for them to assist a cultivation licensee with harvesting their plant material, as well as drying it out and preparing it for either manufacturing or testing.
Thank you for that. Peter is asking, is it possible to move a social equity cultivation outside of its community plan area?
Yes, it's possible. There's two different ways. If a license has been issued, you could request to relocate the license within the same community plan area or to another community plan area that has not reached undue concentration. If you have not received a license and you're unable to move forward at your current location, you could submit the business premises surrender form, which will result in the abandonment of the application. And then through the abandonment process, you would have the ability to either refile within the same community plan area or refile within a community plan area that has not reached undue concentration.
Paul R asks, do I have to get re-verified in order to apply for delivery? And when is the deadline date for me to apply?
So currently DCR is not accepting social equity individual applicant eligibility verification applications at this time. If the process reopens later this year, you would have the ability to get re-verified or to submit your verification documents at that time in order to try to get verified under the current criteria.
MS is asking, would an applicant who already has TA need to redo the previous submitted TA forms as part of the ANN 5000 form?
It's gonna depend. It's gonna depend on the age of the existing temporary approval forms and, how similar those forms are to the updated forms. As the analyst starts to process the annual license application records, you have the ability to either upload your previously submitted and approved application documents, or you can upload the ANN 5000 form. The application itself has been streamlined from the original temporary approval application process because now we have the legal business entity record, which is used to verify the business entity pursuing the license, the owners, indirect owners, financial interest holders, primary personnel on that record. And then you only have to modify that record when there are changes either to the entity, to the operating agreement, to the owner's primary personnel, et cetera. But that doesn't have a direct impact on the application. Really, the application has been simplified to demonstration that you have site control, a proposed business premises diagram, attestations, and indemnification agreements. So if you still have a valid lease, if your business premises diagram hasn't changed, those documents are most likely going to be sufficient for your annual license application record. Depending on the age of your attestations and the indemnification agreement, you may have to resubmit those, but you wouldn't necessarily have to submit the entire ANN 5000 form. That's really going to be record specific. So I would recommend reaching out to your assigned analyst once the materials have been submitted and once they've begun their review.
Thank you, Jason. The next question is sort of a repeat, but it's clarifying an earlier question. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat it with new wording from Rafi S. If I'm a social equity applicant under the original requirement and I am being added to an existing cultivation business through a modification request, do I need to reapply under the new social equity requirements? The original license was completed during phase 2.
So the short answer is no, you don't have to be re-verified. If you were verified under the 2019 criteria, because that criteria was used for the phase 2 LEMC 10408 licenses, you would be able to participate as a social equity individual applicant on that record. And with the new code does allow for folks to aggregate their equity shares to meet the percentage requirements for any given record. So that kind of gives people additional flexibility to, come onto records or to licenses that exist and participate as a social equity applicant, even if they're not by themselves the social equity individual applicant for the record.
Their next question, it might be the final question, is Mark R. Would you need a location or qualified business premises to apply for a cultivation processor license?
Yes. So you would need to have a proposed business premises location in order to apply for the cultivation processor license. There is no distancing restriction between licensees for the non-retail activities. So if you had a location that you're going to have as your office, or you're going to be basically working with one or more cultivators, um, depending on your arrangement with the cultivator, you may be able to sublet a portion of their space and then submit your premises diagram for that location. But the license itself has to be tied to a location, even with the understanding that the processor license type would allow for you to go to another licensee's location to trim and help them cultivate their plants.
We do have another question following up on a previous one from MS in regard to the previously submitted docs in relation to the ANN 5000. What would be considered an outdated or overly aged document?
It if the documents are less than a year old, generally they're not going to be considered outdated. If they're documents that were originally submitted as part of phase 3 retail round 1 and they haven't been updated since 2019, there's likely changes to the forms and documents, and it's going to have to come into a more current version of the form.
Thank you, Jason. That was the last question that I see in the queue.
Thank you very much, Gidget. And thanks everybody for participating in today's Q&A session. Just want to let folks know that the next Q&A virtual lunch will be on Wednesday, July 12th at noon. So I look forward to answering questions again in about a month. So thank you, everybody, and thanks for coming. Bye.